Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind, episode 94.
In fact, parents, in order to teach your child self-government, you have to learn self-government too, which means you have to have a change of heart. Because in the end, that's what self-government's about. Self-government is about having a change of heart. And in order for a parent to help a child have a change of heart, they got to have one too.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Nicholeen Peck. When it comes to parenting, Nicholeen Peck is a worldwide phenomenon and leader, and for good reason. Her proven systems based on 4 simple skills transforms even the most out-of-control teenagers and homes from chaos to calm within days. Though she is an international speaker, author, mentor, and former foster parent of many difficult and troubled teens, and even the president of the Worldwide Organization for Women, which is an approved consultant for the United Nations, Nicholeen spends most of her time at home with her husband and 4 children, which she knows will be her greatest impact and legacy. The fact that she has such a phenomenal influence while still being a stay-at-home mom is evident of the effectiveness of her teaching. To learn more about her mission and methods, you can go to teachingselfgovernment.com. Welcome, Nicholeen.
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm happy to be here.
It's super fun to have. I'm excited to hear what you've got to say because I'm sure there's so many parents that want to figure out how to create a home that goes from chaos to calm. So do you want
to calm? You know, it actually is possible, and I've seen it happen over and over again. So I'm happy to share some of that with you today.
Great. That's going to be awesome. So go ahead right now, though, and tell us a little bit more about yourself, what your family's like, how it's structured, your hobbies and passions, and then we'll go into your mission.
Okay. So, you know, I think the one thing about me that is a little bit different. So first off, how my family is structured. Let's just start there. My oldest son is 19. I've got a daughter who's 17. And I've got another daughter who's 13, and then my youngest son is 11. And those are the 4 children that I've had myself. And then for years, we did foster care. And all of our foster children were all ages 12 to 18.
Wow.
And that was kind of what started things for me. Honestly, I just wanted to stay home with my kids. My husband was going back to work. No, I shouldn't say going back to work, going back to school to change his profession. At that point, we had 2 little tiny ones at home, and I had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I didn't know what to do because I realized, well, if I go get some little job, I'm just going to get enough to pay to tend these kids, and then what's the point? So what can I do? And I just have to say, by providence, ended up becoming acquainted with a place called the Utah Youth Village that does treatment for troubled teens. And anyway, so we ended up doing that. So for a long time, our life looked like us and our children with a kind of a revolving door of treatment youth that would come in and out of our home. And so that was, you know, somewhat how our family has been. And shortly after determining to do foster care, we also determined to do homeschool for our family. So I think a lot of people in our community probably thought we were slightly crazy, actually, because like, who does foster care and homeschool? You know, it's just kind of like, whoa.
Yeah, talk about chaos, you know.
Yeah, it was just like a little bit much for people. But, you know, they couldn't deny that something was happening at our house that was slightly different. And so that's when people started asking me to talk about what we were doing, and I was taken back. I thought, well, I'm just a mom. And that's the thing about me is I really, you know, people will say the word celebrity to me or something like that, and I think, oh, I just don't know if I can ever like that word. I just don't know because I just feel like I'm a mom, and that's my top priority. I wake up in the morning, I go hiking with my children, we work in the garden, we can fruit, we, you know, bake bread and with, you know, natural yeast, and we just like, you know, we grind wheat, and I don't know. I mean, some respects, some people could probably even say we're slightly old-fashioned, but I was raised by parents who knew how to work the land, you know, and so we're the kind of people, we have a half acre of ground and we farm whatever we can of it. We have an orchard and grapevines and berries of all kinds, and we have, vegetables and things, and I mean, we grow thousands of pounds of nuts and produce and stuff every year, and we have our beehives, and that's one of my newest things that I love, is I love being a beekeeper. It's really fun.
Wow.
And
this sounds like a bunch of the good life. Plus, you're so busy on top of it.
Like the Waltons or like Little House on the Prairie. I don't know. We really don't live like that. Like, we've got our share of electronic devices and, electric lights and all that good stuff. But anyway, we really do kind of live that way, because I was trained by parents who pretty much said, freedom is being able to make something out of nothing with your own hands, to be able to grow something. So one thing I love is I love to sew. I don't do as much of it anymore as I used to. I used to have a lot more time to do sewing, but still, like this last year, Paige, my 17-year-old, she said to me, oh, Mom, I need a formal gown for this, and we want it to be, according to our family standard, which has a standard of modesty in it. And so I said, okay, so I made her a formal gown, and
yeah, that's
and
cool.
So, we do things like that. I love taking pictures. I love doing scrapbooks. In recent years, my husband has actually taken over the scrapbook portion of the family. He just decided he really loved digital scrapbooking.
Yeah, exactly.
I love studying genealogy and the history of my ancestors and family and things like that. So I don't know if that's weird. And then reading books. I read tons and tons of books, and I love to write. Those are things I do in my fun time, free time. So I believe definitely in the old-fashioned definition of leisure. So back in the old days, 1800s or something, leisure meant study. So people would work all day and then they would have leisure at night. And that meant that they would read and they would write in journals and they would study and they would do that kind of thing and cultivate their talents. And that was called leisure. Nowadays, we've somewhat modified the meaning of that word. So,
sit and watch TV.
Yeah, we think entertainment means leisure. And really it meant your mind was engaged in something. So it's, nowadays it's kind of mindless for a lot of people. But anyway, so we still try to cultivate that kind of idea. I'm a believer in thinking and having brains work and not just be passive. And so if there's one thing I can do for myself and for my family, it's to keep the brains going. I feel like a brain that is constantly working is not idle and will then produce good instead of bad.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. So it's basically your upbringing that helped you really lead you to this idea of the things that you love to do. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say for sure. I mean, I think every person is somewhat a composite of all the people that have made them and that have raised them. My parents, however, did not necessarily teach me self-government per se. What I'm known for was news to them too. And my parents, even though they taught me wonderful principles, in the end, I think they would say they've learned a lot about self-government from me over the years. So hopefully I've given back to even those generations before me. I certainly wasn't raised by perfect people or perfect parents, but they were principled people, and that goes a long way.
That's awesome. So how has your paradigm or your educational philosophy changed over time and with experience? Did it come with the foster kids that you had? How did that whole thing change?
Well, first off, let's identify my educational philosophy. That's going to be important, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think my educational philosophy is that of pure freedom. And I don't mean the kind of freedom where a person is just left to do whatever they want. I mean the kind where they really go, wait, if I turn my brain or my body over to that, then I'll be in bondage to that. Or if I turn my brain or body in this direction, I will actually be free because I will be fulfilled, I'll accomplish, I'll do my purpose, right? I'll live my purpose in life, that everything will be there'll be meaning in everything. And so,
but by freedom, you're meaning that you're giving your children and yourself the opportunity to at least ponder the thoughts of what the consequences of those actions would be, right? Like you're never pushing or shoving somebody to believe what you want, but you're giving them the opportunity to think that over of how that's going to affect them.
Well, definitely. I mean, you can't make a person, well, you could try, I guess. But you can't make a person choose a certain certain way, but you can.
There we
create
go with
an
that
environment.
chaos, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you can create an environment where a person is very motivated to examine the cause and effect of their behaviors and the way that they communicate with other people. So that's definitely my philosophy. In fact, if you were to sum it up, usually when I tell people my definition of self-government is being able to determine the cause and effect of any given situation and possessing a knowledge of their own behaviors or of your own behaviors so that you can control them. That is what self-government is. It's twofold. First, you understand cause and effect, and you'd be surprised how many people do not understand when I yell at someone, I possibly ruin my relationship.
Yeah, they don't think about that.
That is cause and effect. Or when I start making excuses, my confidence goes down.
Yeah,
and
people don't trust you either. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, my integrity is destroyed in other people's eyes, right? Things like that. And then the second part is constantly being in a state of examining yourself, possessing that knowledge of your own behaviors where you say, I do this. And when I do this, this happens. And I want to change that. I don't like that. I want to fix it so that it's something else. And in order for a person to learn how to do that, the parent absolutely must train it. It requires a lot of problem-solving training. And the problem-solving part of the brain, which is the front part of the brain, the frontal lobe part of the brain, is not fully developed until a person is between the ages of 18 and 24.
Wow.
And so to create a truly self-governed person, you're going toward a self-governed adult. You're not necessarily expecting the children to be fully self-governed by the time they're 10 or 12 because they're constantly needing help with that problem solving. But as you know how to create the environment where that part of the brain is constantly appealed to and the person is not in bondage by your emotions because you're trying to manipulate them one way or another, then they can let go of their emotions that will try to manipulate them and distance them from other people. And then they become free and problem solving and thinking people. So I guess there you go. My philosophy in a nutshell is that a person will actually listen to their own heart and choose to think a situation through instead of just continually by habit react emotionally, physically even to whatever situations that they've trained themselves to react to. So it's slightly against the modern philosophy of emotion. So the modern philosophy of emotions is that if you have an emotion, you have to validate it and let it run its course, right?
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people think about emotions. You can validate an emotion without empowering it. I don't think you need to empower sadness in a person. I don't think that helps them at all because if somebody is angry or somebody is sad, you can say, okay, well, something happened that triggered a sadness in you. So now how are you going to conquer it? So I just turn it to a proactive force. Well, okay, so this has happened. So now what are you going to do so that you're not stuck going down, 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 down? How are you going to choose to pull yourself out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a parent, is that what you do? Is you ask a lot of questions? Is that how you create this attitude of self-governance in your own children? How do you create that in your family where they're able to self-govern themselves? And then also, I guess, as a parent, do you set up small failures in a way? Because like you said, they're not quite ready to necessarily sometimes be able to make all the correct choices right off the bat. How do you do that?
We got two questions there.
Yeah,
so we got two questions. Okay. So first question is, how exactly do you set this up? Okay, that's where I need 3 days, okay, to talk to you, but I'll give you in a nutshell, okay? And then your second question was, do you set up failures for them? I'm going to answer your second question first, because it's faster. And the second question, the answer is no. You don't ever need to set up failures. It's not even necessary because no person makes perfect decisions all the time. And the parent can easily just assess with the child the situations that happen and then give them the proper skills that they need to not get stuck in that same trap next time.
Yeah. But that
process of assessing is called correcting, and there's a certain way that we correct that instills more of that assessment, that second part of learning self-government, than would be just getting angry or emotional at a child. In fact, parents, in order to teach your child self-government, you have to learn self-government too, which means you have to have a change of heart. Because in the end, that's what self-government's about. Self-government is about having a change of heart. And in order for a parent to help a child have a change of heart, they got to have one too.
Where you can distance yourself from from the anger that you might feel or whatever.
Yeah, where you can say, where's the truth here? Are my emotions really truth, or is that a chemical reaction happening in my brain or my body? Is that true, or is the true thing here that I need to talk about this with somebody? I've got to disagree with someone in an appropriate way. What's the true thing? Usually what happens is when we feel something powerful in us, like an emotion, we think that means something's true. It doesn't necessarily mean something's true. It could just mean that we have a habit of reacting in a certain way, that we've trained ourselves to do that, or we've seen someone else do it, and that subconsciously we think that's the way to take care of the situation. Where in reality, it could lead us more toward hurting ourselves because it could lead us more toward a lie. So in order to change our heart, we have to go back to focusing on the truth. And really, truly, if you get to the physiology of the whole thing, when a person learns self-government, it's they learn to listen to their spirit voice, which is that heart voice, as opposed to listening to voice of the body, which is oftentimes chemicals too, right? So that emotions are part of the body voice. So they're able to say, okay, I'm having an emotion right now, but what truly do I need to do to conquer this? And that's when they appeal to the heart voice or the spirit voice, which is the strongest voice in the person.
And how does a parent go about setting that up? Because I think most of us were raised on emotion, where anger just flares or we just say whatever comes out of our mouth. There's not a strong way to censor ourselves in a way and really do that self-assessment without hurting somebody.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, our society has bought so much into emotions being who we are that there's even a new show just came out. It's called Inside Out. And I actually went and saw it. Now, you got to know something about me. I like way overanalyze movies, okay? So here you go.
I do too.
But, and that's because I'm the kind of person that reads classic books. It's a passion because I want stuff that's going to change me every time. And if it's not going to change me, I want to see who they're trying to change and what they're doing to do it, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm not saying that Disney's wicked or anything. It's a cute idea for a show. In fact, some of it's kind of funny and stuff, and I don't want to ruin it for anybody who hasn't seen it. But I will say that the whole premises of the show is that inside each person's brain, your brain basically consists of emotions and memories. And that's all you have, is emotions and memories. And your emotions just constantly trigger memories for you, and they control you. So there's these 4 or 5 emotions. I think there's 5 emotions that are in everybody's brain, okay? And they've got anger, joy, sadness, attitude, and fear. Okay. And this is what's in this show. And what'll happen is there's a control panel of the brain, and these characters just keep taking over. And every person that they're controlling just has to follow what the emotions tell them to do. And so it does give a kind of a subliminal message that all we are is emotions, and that our emotions are actually what are powering us, and they are the things that are controlling us. So what's the antithesis of that? What's the opposite? Is that we actually have no control over ourselves.
Yeah, that we have to just go with that. And like you said, I think that is kind of our modern culture. We hear a lot about, I have a right. There's lots of I have a right versus, responsibility type of thing.
Oh, yeah. I could go into rights a lot. I do want to talk about that at the United Nations, but that could be another hour, so I won't spare you. So your other question was, how do you set this up? Let me just address that the quickest way I can, okay? Because people really will come to couples retreats and stuff with me, and they will spend 3 days, and I will train a husband and a wife how to take this home and teach the children. We will help them feel confident with all the skills and everything that they need. And, it really is... it's a lot. And when you look at my book that I've written, so I have multiple books. I have a children's series of books. Each of them teach a self-government skill. Then I have, adult books and stuff. But my main book is a book called Parenting a House United. And that book is almost 400 pages long. It's 300 and something. And it is packed. It's none of it's wasted. I had to cut out 200 pages of that book before I published it.
Wow.
And so, there's a ton of stuff in there. And so I could talk for a long time, but this is how I'm going to sum it up. So in order to create the right environment, and I call this environment where a person learns self-government, I call it a family government, because it really is a family culture shift. Every family on purpose should be deciding what kind of a culture that they want anyway. But, some people don't. They just go with whatever the status quo is or whatever everyone else is doing or whatever it turns out to be, and they assume that's what it was supposed to be. But I have this See, I'm sort of a believer in God. I shouldn't say sort of. Sort of. I'm like a diehard believer in God, and I feel like he put us on a planet that was wild and intended for us to tame it so that we could have food, right? And be able to live. I also feel like that as children, we come uncultivated, and that he self-evidently gave each child two people, because the child can't even show up without the two people, right?
Yeah.
now I know not every child ends up getting their two people in the end. I get that, but it's supposed to happen that they have two people, because otherwise they can't even arrive here. So he set that up so that just like we cultivate the earth and just like we care for the earth, of course we would then be the stewards of what was created because of us, which was the child, right? So we cultivate the child and care for the child. So definitely I believe that, and as soon as that child comes, that husband and that wife and that child all make a thing called family. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is. It's always been that way since, like, if you read your Bible, all the way back, Cain and Abel and all that was family. So this family has a culture. And if the parents are going to deliberately cultivate a child, why wouldn't the parents deliberately cultivate the environment to raise the child? Why would they just go, well, I got to raise this child. Let's see what happens. Like, that to me is negligent.
Yeah. You got to have a mission or a plan type.
Yeah, you got to set something up. And if you don't, you're going to still raise a child. That is true. They still will be raised. It just might not actually be what you want, which brings me to thing number 1 on how to do this. So thing number 1 is, what do you want? Every parent, every family, every couple, they need to decide, what does our family want? And I call this creating a 20-year vision. I talk about how to do this in my book, and I take people step by step through how to create this vision of what kind of a family that you want. So this is the beginning of your culture. This is the reason why a family would care about self-government, because they care. They've already invested then in this picture of who they're going to become. They're invested in becoming this certain kind of a family and having this certain kind of a feeling and getting to this certain place that they set in their minds. So then at that point, then they have to have what's called a family government. And to create a family government, then you need to have an appropriate structure. So structure is vitally important for self-government. No plant ever grew without there being key elements, right? Like you got to have dirt,
water,
and sun and water, and no weeds. Okay, so there's key things, and things have to happen at a certain time too, right? Because like if the timing's off, still you don't get a plant, even if you have all the factors in place. You have to water like regularly. Anyway, and stuff. So that's the structure, and the family needs to have a structure to get what they want and to get to that vision. And then they also need to have a certain kind of a tone. So the tone is that feeling that exists in the home. There's a lot of things with tone that I could talk about, but some of the words are like calmness. So calmness is the root of confidence. It is the sign of a person who is at harmony with themselves and God. And most people are not truly calm in our world. A person could stop talking. That doesn't mean they're calm. Calmness is a kind of power, and you recognize it when someone has it. It's huge. It's something that for years I've worked on cultivating. As I did foster care for troubled teens, I had to have this. If I didn't know that I would be okay no matter what, how could I help them be okay?
Yeah, exactly.
I had to have that. So it was something that I really worked on cultivating for a long time. So calmness, respect, which is a huge issue in our society today. And respect goes back to roles, okay? Because you can't actually respect a person who you don't honor their role. So the roles of parents and children are all over the place, and they really need to not be. Parents actually are not even correcting their children in many homes around the world. And a parent who won't correct their child is a parent who does not honor the role of the child. Because what is the role of the child? The child is a learner. That's their role.
That's interesting.
So anyway, yeah, they're not even respecting their own child. And then, of course, the child doesn't respect the parent and do what they say, because the child they feel too empowered. And empowerment is a fantastic thing, but it's got to be done within the sphere of roles. You have to have roles with the empowerment. Anyway, I could go on forever with that. So then there's of course, love, mercy are part of the tone, acceptance, trust, these kinds of things. But another part of the tone is a tone of advocacy. So if my child is not happy, if my child's having an attitude problem or they're out of control, I have to advocate for them, don't I? kind of a loving parent would I be if I let them just wallow in that for a week or even 2 hours? What kind of a parent would I be? Like, that doesn't even show that I care. So as their advocate, I have to help them out of that.
Well, and a lot of times children don't know how to express those, that, you have to kind of walk them through that, right? Like those feelings.
And that goes back to structure, actually. It goes back to your structure because your child needs skills. There's a skill I teach. We teach children 4 basic skills: following instructions, accepting no answers and criticism, accepting consequences, and disagreeing appropriately. So a child needs to know, okay, well, if I'm feeling a certain thing or if I feel like I'm not being understood, what skill do I have? What piece of structure exists in our home so that I can make sure that I'm understood and that mom and dad take time to listen? Well, that's a skill called disagree appropriately. And so you teach the child that skill ahead of time, and then when you feel like they might need it, you even bring it up as a suggestion by doing something that I call pre-teaching. So, and that's one of the 5 things that we teach parents how to do. So structurally, we teach children 4 skills. We teach parents 5 skills. They have 3 meetings to check up on how they're doing in their relationships, how the tone and structure is doing, and how to conquer family problems together. They take votes. The children work on taking ownership of the environment of self-government that's happening in the home. And in the end, what you get is you get a child who's very confident, very mature, very smart. They see things, they analyze things. They're very calm. They're very assertive. They have skills. They know how to communicate with people. They're ready to launch into the world as an adult. And that, in the end, is the key thing.
Is that how you teach them how to be leaders? I mean, part of your other philosophy is building leaders, correct?
Absolutely. I believe in leadership. And we do what's called a leadership education in our home, where we really truly teach them the skills. I mean, we help them have a lot of ownership of everything that's happening in their lives. However, we do not abdicate our role to do it. So a lot of people think that to train a leader, you have to just give them stewardship over a whole bunch of things. That's one part of it. But if they were never mentored by an actual leader, if they were never actually told by another scholar how to be a scholar, or by another person who's self-governing how to do the self-governing, then actually they're left lost, which creates tons of anxiety for the person, not confidence.
Yeah, so, I never thought about that.
So there does have to be a level of confidence that you're instilling in them, and that comes only from, correcting them, teaching them, and when they're completely out of control, helping them pull it back in control, helping them apply the skills that you've already taught them ahead of time. That's the other thing about teaching self-government that really is quite different than a lot of different parenting things that are taught out there, is that it's all proactive. So we teach the children ahead of time. These are the skills. These are the steps to the skills. So there's like 5 steps to how to follow an instruction. Here's those steps. Okay, when they don't go right, if you can't look at the person, if you can't keep a calm face, voice, and body, because that's steps 1 and 2, if you can't, whatever thing, then this is exactly how mom will correct you. These are the words I'm going to say exactly. Because mom's self-governing, right? So she's not going to fall back into an old habit of reacting and getting emotional and getting frustrated either. She's going to keep to the same code that the kids are. If they're going to self-govern and use skills, she's going to self-govern and use skills. So she says, this is exactly how I'll correct. Well, then the children know word for word. I mean, my children, they can stand in front of congregations and audiences of people and say, this is how you correct a child. In fact, they've done it for years. Our family lived in England for a month. And my 9-year-old stood up in front of crowd after crowd and said, okay, so this is how you correct a child, and this is why you do it this way. And so they're going to be great parents. They're free, very free, because they understand the philosophy of everything I'm doing and why. They understand how it's free. They understand why it feels free. And they know that it makes everybody in the home happy. Nobody has to have anxiety or worry, or no relationships ever have to be feeling strained. My children are best friends with us as parents and with each other. And, I've talked to a lot of families, and they often say, I'll say, what do you want for your family? Oh, I want us to be best friends. And I say to them, okay, that's a great thing, but don't ever just go for friendship. You have to go for parent-child relationship that's whole and the way God intended it to be. And then what happens is you end up becoming best friends.
Yeah, I think there's a big gap in our society. I mean, we went from parents who are very controlling to now I know a lot of parents that are just kind of letting their kids do whatever they want. And like you said, I never really thought about it till you talked about anxiety. But, somebody pointed out, I just got done with a leadership training, and we were looking at medical forms, and it was like the amount of kids on anxiety medication is just staggering. And I wonder if that's why, because, we've gone from like this control method to these parents, like to pretty much just leaving the kids, alone. And like you said,
modern progressive parenting.
Yeah. That it creates an anxiety within them. They don't know how to deal with what's going on around them.
Well, if their home environment is not predictable, then their parents are their enemies, not their friends, because the anxiety turns them into that.
Before we go on, let us take a minute and hear about our sponsors.
Changing a paradigm takes some study, but like me, you are probably super busy. That's why we've teamed up with Audible. Go to our website, theluminousmind.net. Get a free month of Audible with 2 audiobooks, thousands of titles in exchange for only books that you absolutely love. You too can be learning on the go to keep that fire burning.
Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Nicholeen Peck.
The home environment has to be predictable. So people always ask me, well, how do you know you have results? Well, I have tons and tons of cases of families that I've taught, plus foster children that I've lived with. Like these families, I was just on the phone with a parent today who said, okay, Nicholeen, the rule of 3 and, learning self-government and these skills has changed our whole family. Our son was so obstinate. And honestly, when we first presented this to him, he was mad at us, really mad. He did not want to do these skills and to do this. But now our home is bliss and he is happy and we are united, just like your book says. And I never thought this was possible. And people tell me stuff like this with tears in their eyes all the time. And it's because it puts the roles back in place and because it teaches people a skill when they need it. They have something to use instead of just searching through their emotional database to see if they've got any emotion that can get them out of it. It's a really liberating thing. In fact, I don't know if you're aware, but in 2009, the BBC did a documentary of our family. And they brought us 2 troubled teens from England, both ages 17, a girl and a boy. And for 2 days, they had fits and tantrums and everything. And after 2 days, they just completely changed. And by the end of the program, they were crying and begging not to leave our home. And they said, please don't make us go. We feel so safe here. No one at home will understand why we don't want to party, why we don't want to do drugs, why we don't want to live that lifestyle anymore. Please don't make us go.
Wow.
And of course we had no choice because, there was a TV program and they signed contracts with their parents and stuff that they would bring them back. But it really did show. And the program was called The World's Strictest Parents. And our show became the most watched episode ever on that program. And it was because we were so calm. We weren't angry ever. And the children changed so drastically that they were begging not to leave. And they felt it. People felt it. There was a definite feeling of love, but they didn't get away with anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a way to have – some people think you have to trade one for the other. Like if you're going to be loving, you have to let them do whatever they want. And if you're going to be strict, you have to be mean. And actually both of those ideas are wrong. And that's basically why people love teaching self-government so much is because I think they finally feel like they've found something that shows them the truth of both things that they realize. That yes, it is about the heart. Yes, it is about love, that feeling, that tone you have in your family. But it's also about being the parent and correcting them.
Wow. The tone really does make a difference in the acceptance of whatever you're trying to teach somebody, right? I mean, if there's an angry tone there, they're never going to absorb what you're trying to teach them or the principles that you're trying to set there.
Well, yeah, because anger is manipulation. That's all it is.
I didn't think about that, but It really is. Well, your kids learn that manipulation from you. When you're angry with them, then they learn to use that manipulation with you when they're older.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. So this is what I teach, and I go all over the world teaching it. Like I said, we went and lived in England for a month. We've been to China, we've been to Canada. My book is translated into Spanish and Chinese and Japanese, and we're going to be heading off soon to Kenya, it sounds like. So a couple of weeks ago, the Catholic diocese in Kenya called and asked if we would come down and train parents and leaders of the Catholic Church down there how to teach their families self-government so that they don't get caught in all of the problems with media addictions and with, porn addictions and with family dysfunctions and stuff that they're seeing themselves in. They want a way out, and they're seeing that it goes back to good parenting, and that's why they asked me to come. So I think that my life is pretty much like set on a track. And I don't know if I don't want a way out of it, but I don't think there is a way out of it. I think at this point, it started out, I was minding my own business, being just a mom, and people started saying what's happening at your house. And then it went on, people asked us to be on TV. We said no, and then felt like, I think we really do have to do this thing. And we ended up doing it. And then, then come the books, and then come all kinds of other things. And all I can say is, it's just something I feel really humbled to be part of. And because it wasn't anything I planned on ever. I didn't go out searching for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So do you feel like, we kind of talked about in the beginning, kind of a divine destiny type thing. Was this a slow type of process that you went through to come to these habits or these skills that you have, that you've kind of slowly mentored over time, or do you feel like it was like a bout of revelation, or how did that happen?
I'd have to say kind of like all of the above, but for sure when you learn it's slow. I'm never done. I'm not done yet. I read voraciously, but I will say that also, I don't know if you believe in birth gifts, but there are certain people who are born with certain gifts. And I was the kind of child that couldn't even memorize my math facts without giving each number a personality and a conflict. Each math problem was a conflict they had to resolve within a relationship. Honestly, that's how it was for me when I was a child. And so I was the kind of person that other adults, when I was like even 13 years old, other adults would say, Nicholeen, could you come mediate this conversation for us? That doesn't mean I was perfect at it yet, because I certainly wasn't. But when I was 14, I learned how to fix my relationship with my parents, which was not good. It was strained, and there was a wise person who pulled me aside and said, hey, Nicholeen, have you ever thought of just saying okay? And I decided to say okay and be okay to my parents, and I was free. I was instantly free. And so see,
does that go like with forgiveness too? When you have strained relationships, how does a person just forgive and just go, okay, I'm willing to put my pride down?
Well, you know what it was is that I was really strong-willed. Self-government works great for a strong-willed person. I was really, really strong-willed, and the person, this other adult, basically challenged me. It wasn't one of my parents. It was somebody else. And they basically challenged me and said, no, really, Nicholeen, how about for 2 weeks you just try it? Just go try it. I bet if you say okay and be okay, that you'll get more of what you want. I bet your parents will give you almost anything you want. And I didn't believe them. I said, that's not true. And they said, just try it. See what happens. And I said, okay. So I went home. And that night it was my dish night. And I remember my mom saying, Nicholeen, it's your dish night. Like just waiting for the fight, right?
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And I just stood up and I started doing them. And I remember the shock on my parents' faces. They didn't know what had happened to me. They were like, whoa, what just happened? That was weird. And then a couple days later, I remember my mom saying, Nicholeen, you really ought to clean your room. And I said, okay. My room was a mess, clothes everywhere, stuff everywhere. I just started cleaning it up. And I remember her standing there in the doorway looking at me for probably 20 minutes, just not really sure how to take it in that I was cleaning my room just like that. And then this thought came to my mind, and the thought was this. And it's going to sound silly, but this is what really came into my head. I am so powerful. That was the thought. And so see, I was still doing this for selfish reasons. I wasn't bought into the principle yet. The principle was really have a change of heart and everything changes. But I was strong-willed, so selfishly at first I decided to say okay. And this is how it is for many kids who actually are really strong-willed, whose parents start teaching them self-government. At first they do it for selfish reasons. Well, I don't want the negative consequence, so I'm just going to do this other thing and get by. And then all of a sudden they realize something's changed with their relationship. They feel more love. They feel more unity. They value the person. They're feeling valued. There's these things that happen that are these natural consequences that make their hearts change so that then they don't desire to be obstinate anymore. They don't want that. They want the closeness of the relationship, and that's what happened to me.
So you're not talking about being a doormat. I mean, where you just take whatever anyone says, but at the same time being a little more workable and bendable to try to figure out how you can be a better service to somebody else.
Do you know what? The only reason that a person would be a doormat is if the person who's wiping their feet on them is actually trying to manipulate them. If a parent is telling a child something they need to do, that is within the sphere of the parent's role. And so the child would not be a doormat unless the parent was emotionally trying to manipulate them, either with anger or frustration or with emotion like sadness or pity or excuses or whatever. Okay, then the child could become a doormat.
That's interesting.
But if the parent is just instructing the child, which is what parents were intended to do, in order to create a child who's a leader, you got to keep pointing him in the right direction, which means you've got to lead them. If you don't lead them by pointing them in the right direction, which requires no answers, instructions, corrections, if a parent does not do that, the child will not turn out to be a leader. In fact, what we see happening is parents hoping for that to occur, and the child having what's called failure to launch, which means they don't leave the house. They don't turn the computer off. They don't embrace adulthood because they don't have confidence, because they haven't actually been pointed in the direction they need to go enough, and they still feel unsure.
So it's not making decisions for your child. It's actually helping them make those decisions, right? Because I see that too, where kids, they don't know how to make any decisions because every decision they've ever had's been already made for them.
Well, yeah, micromanaging is just another form of manipulation, and that's not right either, And so, so you got to be careful, right? You don't micromanage your child. But here's the thing: if you teach them those skills and they learn self-government, they do. If somebody comes to my house, they might think, well, this lady, she teaches them to follow instructions, accept no answers, all this kind of stuff. And they probably think they're going to see a bunch of little robots around my house. Not on your life. My kids are all over doing things, creating things, and making all kinds of messes and stuff, just like kids do. But at the end of the time, when mom gives an instruction that it's time to clean up, they just say okay and do it, and they be okay, and then play and have fun the rest of the night. They just don't spend any time being emotionally in bondage.
That's interesting. That's so neat. So how does a person start out with this? Give us a little bit more information about kind of your program and how someone can begin to have, a home that goes from chaos to calm.
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of different ways. Depending on how a person learns, probably the very best thing that we have, aside from, so I would say the top level of getting trained in this would be, I come to your house and teach your family, but I only do that like 5 times a year because I'm still raising my own family, right? So that's the rare, okay? And then next down, kind of more, mid-range, is there's come to a couples retreat. So we've got one in Cancun in October.
Oh, and you don't go to little places, you go to nice places.
Well,
awesome.
sometimes we do little local ones and stuff like that. But yeah, people were requesting, hey, can we go somewhere like Cancun? And I said, yeah, sure, let's do this. So we've got one in Cancun. It's a screaming deal, actually. It's $1,900. And that's for the couple. For 6 days, that includes all the lodging, all the food, all the activities, and all the training.
Wow, that is a screaming deal.
It is. It's a super screaming deal. So anyway, we have those kinds of things. And then we have the implementation course. Now, the implementation course is by far, I would say, the most common way that I mentor people through learning self-government in their home. So on the implementation course, that's on the website, teachingselfgovernment.com. And it comes with a membership to a support group where I answer your questions every week, and in an environment that's very much like we're doing right now. And then we record those, we send them out to everybody, and then it comes with the book, it comes with videos, it comes with audio classes that take you, like 20 some odd audio classes that take you step by step through everything. And you have all of the online course for a lifetime. It really is an amazing thing. Of course, then you can buy some things piece by piece. If somebody just wants to buy the Parenting House United book, they could buy that. Some people like to take stuff bit by bit. Some people like to just read the whole thing and go for it themselves. I mean, I think you have to analyze kind of what kind of a learner you are. We have children's books that we teach the 4 basic skills. We've got 4 children's books. They're each one of them's named after one of my children. I have 4 children and I teach 4 skills. It turned out perfect. And there's 2 girls, 2 boys. Super perfect. Anyway, so
that's awesome.
Yeah, so we've got those to teach kids. We've got charts. We've got cue cards for the parents. We've got audio classes and videos and journals to help with meetings and problem-solving exercises that we teach called SOTAs. And, just there's really all kinds of things that you can get there on teachingselfgovernment.com. Like I said, probably the best ways to do the training are in-home visits, of course, which are super rare, and then couples retreats, which happen a few times a year, and then the implementation course, which is ongoing all the time. You can access it at any moment, start wherever you want, the beginning, or jump in somewhere else, and you've got it for a lifetime, plus the support group that is there to, just help you along the way for as long as you want, to have that support group. So, and then the other resources. So there's a lot of things there to choose from, actually.
Yeah, I just got on your website and a video popped up. I was like, oh, what? So if you hear her double talking, that's why. I'm like, whoops.
Once that video pops up, what you want to do is you want to go down to the bottom of the page and click Parenting Self-Government. And when you go there, then you'll link into all of the blog of articles and things like that. So
that's awesome.
That's a good thing. Yeah, if anybody on here wants a coupon code for anything, we could just give that out for anybody who's on the call here today. If you type in TSG, that stands for Teaching Self-Government, TSG Deals, then it will give you 20% off of any purchase that you make. You do have to create a login. So you create a login and then type in TSG Deals when you're in the checkout, and you should get 20% off whatever purchase. So
okay, I'll put that on the show notes for anybody who is interested. This sounds amazing. Like you said, I mean, to go from chaos to calm sounds like a heavenly situation. So for so many families that are struggling. On my podcast a lot, we talk about we weren't parented. We were kind of just shuffled around and taken from place to place. But the real parenting was kind of lost when we stopped working together as families. And so it just sounds like what you're doing brings that back. What I think used to be more of the norms in our society. So
it definitely is. What I teach, some people call it teaching self-government, some people call it traditional strict parenting, but it's very historical. It's a moral, historical type of family communication that, has existed before. We just lost it with the onset of some modern philosophies that have created some breakdowns in family communication. So some of those modern philosophies started with people like Dr. Benjamin Spock, who said, you want to be your kid's friend instead of its parent. And that was a big, big misunderstanding that went global. And now we're seeing a lot of negative consequences of that.
All the anxiety that we have.
Yeah.
Wow. So if you could leave a legacy, what do you hope it's going to be? It sounds like you're already well on your way.
Well, I'll tell you what, hopefully I've already left one, but if I could leave one even more than what I've done now, I'll tell you. So I'm from the United States, of course, and our country was founded on the idea that we would be a self-governing people. When the founders of our country studied about government, they studied many different peoples. They studied the Romans and the Greeks, and they studied the Anglo-Saxons. And the Anglo-Saxons would have been a very close study for them because they were English. The Anglo-Saxons founded a land called Angloland, which then became called England. The Anglo-Saxons, who based their form of government off the Israelite government, which is in the Old Testament of the Bible, they divided themselves into different groups, and the most basic group was the family, and they determined that the family was to create a type of a person that could self-govern. And if a family could create self-governing people, then you could have a self-governing form of government, which meant that the government itself didn't have to ever do very much for the people. So the family would train the self. The self would choose to problem solve. If they didn't know answers, they'd go back to the family for help. And if the family didn't have answers to their problems, they'd go to their friends and their community. If they didn't have answers to their problems, they'd go to their churches, their parishes. And then if they didn't have answers to their problems, then they would finally go to the government to see if they could get help for whatever their problem happened to be. But it was so rare that they would ever need to get that far, because all of the people were self-governing, problem-solving, thinking people. And so this is just like no small goal here, but I would really like
to get back to
to
that.
change the way that we solve problems in our world. We solve problems in our world by going to the government. Everything, we blame the government and we appeal to the government and we let them make our choices for everything. And that is not the way that, at least in the United States, it was set up to be. And originally in England, it wasn't set up to be that way either. And we have lost that self-governing understanding in our nation. If one family can raise 4 kids who know self-government, who can then raise 4 families of however many kids, that could change the world. And it is changing the world, because that's my family. If 100 families, if 1,000 families, if thousands of families, which now are, I have a database of thousands of families, thousands and thousands, who are following and thinking about the idea of self-government. If that occurs, it could very likely change the entire world for the better. And in the end, that's what I'm going for.
That's awesome. That is amazing. I would love to see that too. We just see so many people making excuses for, how things are going. And the thing I love about it is I think your message, gives hope to families that have older children that they feel like are kind of like it's hopeless type of thing. But
yeah,
your message sounds very hopeful to help some of those older kids and older families be able to heal themselves and to hopefully become, more self-governing.
It's true. It's, of course, the very best if you teach it to them from the time they're little, from the time they're babes. If you teach them self-government starting when they can say the word "ote," then you will have children who never remember being emotionally bound, never remember being manipulated or thinking about manipulating somebody else. You will have children that are free and are confident. And, but if your children are older, it's never too late. And we've definitely shown that even on TV, taking 17-year-olds in our home and just within a couple of days changing.
That's awesome. Well, before we say goodbye, do you have any final parting words of advice or maybe a favorite quote that you'd like to share? And then give us your contact information of how we can get in touch with you.
Yeah. Probably one of my very favorite quotes is, "No success can compensate for failure in the home."
That's true.
And I absolutely feel like that's true. I feel like sometimes we spend so much energy on so many other things. And in the end, we trade what happens at home. We trade that energy for outside things, and we don't put it back in our family where it belongs. And then in the end, we regret it. And in the end, we wonder why we've got the problems that we do. Cause and effect is a real law. It's real. Everything that we do ends up with an effect at one point or another. And oftentimes we see bad things happen with our family and we think, wow, how did this happen? I worked so hard, but something often did happen somewhere along the way. And we need to be conscious of that. That doesn't mean that we can make someone be perfect, because, that just can't happen. And there's always other factors into what makes a person. But as parents, we can be more diligent. My favorite word is the word deliberate. I feel like when a person is deliberate and they make a decision on purpose about what kind of family they'll have and what kind of person they'll be and what kind of child they're raised, then they have a greater potential of achieving that. So my parting thoughts are, be deliberate. Don't trade in some other success for that success in the family, because that's never worthwhile. And I also like to tell people, nowadays, if you want to change the world, really change the world, get married, have a child, and raise them good. And I think we are in a state in our world right now, since dysfunction's the new function and selfishness is in fashion, we need families doing their job more than any other time in our world. And so if people want to change the world, they get married, have a child, and raise them up good. If they can raise them to self-govern themselves, they will be the leaders. They will be the power behind the force for good in the years to come.
Wow. You almost have me in tears. So thank you so much for coming on. I really have enjoyed being able to feel of your spirit and to hopefully learn from you. I'm definitely checking out your website and, and trying. I'm not saying I have a bad home life, but you can always
you
make
know what? You
improvements.
don't. Yeah, I was going to say, you don't have to have a bad home life to learn self-government. You just have to want to be even better and better all the time. Isn't that what life's about? I thought it was. I mean, I don't feel like I'm ever done learning to govern myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been fun talking to you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on, Rebecca, and best of luck with you and your mission.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Nicholeen Peck and teachingselfgovernment.com, go to our show notes at theluminousmind.net. Be sure to become a subscriber to our free email list and consider joining our program by going to the scheduling tab to become a fire starter today. Help support the podcast by making all your Amazon purchases through the free Amazon widget on our website. Also, sign up to receive 2 free audiobooks from Audible at theluminousmind.net. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Google+. Get our audio content on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher. To help us grow, consider telling your friends about us. Leave us a review. Tell us how we can help you so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.